Hi, everyone. I'm Kyler from the Content Mix, and I'm excited to be here with Rory McEntee, Brand and Marketing Director at Gymbox, one of London's most unique gyms. Back in 2003, Gymbox's founders were thinking outside of the box and wanted to bring a new approach to fitness in London. Starting in a West End garage, they replaced cars, bikes, and vans with nightly resident DJs, neon lights, and dancers. Blending exercise with pleasure, their fresh approach to fitness helps members associate exercise with fun and not sweat and tears. And content marketing has been a driving force behind their success. So there's no one better to speak with than the business-owned brand and marketing director. Like Gymbox, Rory's career has been about taking creative risks and having an independent spirit, something that I thoroughly believe in. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Rory to the show. Thank you so much for joining me today, Rory.
Hi, Kyler. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, it's our pleasure, and excited to learn more about
Gymbox. Well done on pronouncing my surname. Everyone has awful difficulty with my Irish surname, so
it's
well
quite
done.
difficult. Whenever we have Irish guests on the show, I always get a bit worried because it always have these different pronunciations. And I'm from Boston originally, so there's a lot of Irish people there. But I still have to wrap my head around the pronunciation sometimes.
Difficult.
So you shared with the audience that you are Irish. So can you just tell us a bit more about like where you're from and what's your connection to content marketing in Europe?
Sure. So Irish born. I've lived in London now probably about 13 years. So I'm a London-based marketeer. And you really summed me up quite well in that introduction. I've kind of worked for kind of quite creative and content-led brands over the years. I have a real kind of passion for content on, particularly challenger brands and kind of, I've worked for David and Goliath type brands, big brands, small brands, in the kind of numerous industries and across kind of the whole marketing mix. And I think my passion is really kind of delivering disruptive content for kind of small challenger brands and really kind of challenging the status quo.
And where did that passion come from? Just to like kind of help, I guess, the underdog, you'd say in this case.
So I think, I've been very lucky in, my background and my career in marketing. I've worked agency side and brand side. So I've also kind of worked for brands that I've had a real interest in. So I've worked in kind of film and entertainment. I've worked for a number of different cinema brands over the years. On my agency side, I worked for Heineken and McDonald's because I kind of wanted to get a big brand experience. I've also then kind of worked in sports and fitness. And there's a really great brand, Paddy Power, where I kind of learned my trade, who are known around the world for amazing kind of disruptive content campaigns. And I think settling then in Gymbox in a brand that is 11 clubs in London and is fighting with small resource and trying to do things differently. I kind of landed in an area what I like to do, which is kind of really do things differently and not accept what other people are doing. So it's kind of my personal passion for kind of challenging the norms has kind of led me into doing that kind of from a career point of view. And I just love generally kind of brand and storytelling. And, I've never been massively, a crazy thing to say working in marketing, but I've never been massively into kind of short-term KPIs and sales. I'm more about kind of long-term brand building. And that's probably where my passion and where I really kind of get excited in content and marketing.
That's fantastic. Now, just before we get to, I want to learn more about how you ended up working for Gymbox, but is like fitness something that you're interested in as well? Like personally, is that something, are you combining your interests there?
Yeah, 100%. So I think, again, I feel very lucky, very privileged that I've been able to work for brands where I have that personal interest. So like a lot of people, I like food. I like drinking. I'm Irish. I like sport and I like looking after myself. I like fitness. And I think I've been very focused on where I want to take my career. And I've only wanted to work for brands where I've got that personal interest because I find it difficult to switch off. And I wouldn't, again, no disrespect to anybody else, but I wouldn't want to work for a toothpaste brand or a dog food brand. I need to have that passion because I don't switch off and I'm always thinking about ideas in my day-to-day life. And I don't have that kind of shut off 9 to 5 after work. I'm always thinking. So Gymbox kind of came about from me, networking and actually, really kind of getting into my fitness. I'm a little bit older now, and I've actually got more fitter as I got older. And I wanted to have that in my kind of work career. And again, there's a number of factors in terms of meeting the right people, right place, right time. But I think a lot of my creative work that I did for some challenger brands such as Paddy Power, Everyman Cinema in London, I think that the team at Gymbox saw that, and we had a conversation, and things. Here I am now.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. And I'm assuming they give you a free membership, no?
They do. That's one of the perks, one of the many perks of working in a gym. And the office is next to the gym, so there's no excuse not to go, which is great.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now, you kind of have a challenge, and I wanted to know a bit how this role is different from the previous roles you held, because you said that you have 11 clubs, right, in London, and you're talking about London, which is one of the biggest cities, like, in Europe, and it's a world power, and you're going to have all these different types of gyms, and people are going to have so many options. So kind of a challenge, to really differentiate yourself within such a big market.
Yeah, it is. And I think my job is made a little bit easier because there's a brand truth behind the marketing that I do. So our gyms are very different to other gyms. We have, again, you summed it up really well at the beginning, but, we have the most creative and unique classes in the industry. So, we just launched some recently. We have sword play, which is a class where you can kind of channel your Kill Bill and do a sword class. We have a roller skate class, Watch My Wheels. We have a new class with a comedian called Sunday Roast, where you have an instructor and a comedian in the class, and you're getting roasted verbally and physically, where they make a bit of fun of you, in a very kind of inclusive way. We have a cannibalist class, which is a recovery class with CBD oil patches. So we have a real brand truth in terms of what I do. We've also got DJs in our clubs. We have aesthetically beautiful club lighting. They're huge. So I've got so much content to play with. So that makes it a little bit easier in the first instance.
Yeah. I was just going to say too, like for that, like you said, storytelling is key to your the marketing strategy. And it's something that you're passionate about, which I think it's always nice to hear, because sometimes when content marketing, people are more concerned about the numbers, but it seems like you're someone that believes in like the whole mission of what content marketing is. So why is content marketing essential to the success of Gymbox?
Well, I think, look, ultimately, nobody really reads advertising. People kind of read what interests them or consumes what interests them, and that just may so happen to be an advert or content. So, my approach and how we do things very differently is, we're not about trying to make that sale initially. We're about generating brilliant content and trying to get that content, whether that's through our classes, our club interiors, our DJs and our music, or we do these really cool parties in London in kind of underground clubs. It's about creating this community and lifestyle. So I don't even see Gymbox as a gym brand. I see it as a lifestyle brand. And people naturally are drawn to cool, interesting, different brands. And London is a place where people want experiences.
Right.
It's a melting pot of every culture and every type of person. And our brand ethos is anything goes. So you can be whoever you want to be in Gymbox. And for me, then that allows our content strategy to be really different and also quite unique. And not only in the gym industry, but I think we're quite well known across numerous industries as delivering really, really strong and different content. It's almost, what will Gymbox do next? That people are waiting to see what we come up with, and that's a little bit of a challenge internally. How do we kind of step up every time and deliver really good marketing campaigns and content?
Yeah, and I think it's really cool, like that idea that you kind of compared it to London itself. Like the city is a diverse city, and people are coming from all different backgrounds, and that's kind of what you want to, like, that community. You want to foster that within Gymbox and kind of make it unique, but also welcoming to anyone of different fitness levels and ages and interests. It seems like a really cool idea.
Yeah.
Now, this is not your first podcast either. You were in an interview with the Marketing Society recently, and you discussed the importance of taking creative risk in marketing and how this helps keep your brand fresh. So it's something that you were mentioning before, how Gymbox, people are kind of on the edge of their seats waiting for the next, piece of campaign that's going to come out. So why do you think taking creative risk is so important when it comes to marketing? And what's an example of a creative risk that you've taken and, the outcome doesn't have to necessarily be positive?
That's a really good question, actually. I think, first of all, as a small challenger brand, you have to do things differently to stand out. And I think, we tend to toe the line a little bit. We try to be topical. We try to be, disruptive but not offensive. And the world is changing, and what we would have done years and years ago creatively and taking risks, we have to be a little bit more mindful now, with particularly the social media world, and our audience is changing. So the audience we had 15, 20 years ago is very different to the audience that we have now. So creative risks is at the heart of what we do, however. So we do always look to try and kind of move the needle and push pieces to get essentially, PR and response to our campaigns in a cost-effective way. We don't have budgets to be doing, billboard adverts or TV adverts. So we have to be very clever at what we do. So a couple of examples of the creative risks we've taken. I'll probably bring it back to our classes, actually, with being topical and being relevant. So in the height of Brexit, which, was the most topical, probably still is the most topical thing that's on the news over the last couple of years here, we developed a class called Brexfit, which was essentially a class to vent your frustration out on Brexit, and essentially kind of an anger management class. And we put politicians' heads on punch bags and slam balls and did lots of different things. And it was a bit of a creative risk because Brexit was so divisive, and what side you were on. So we needed to be very careful that we weren't picking a side, and that we were actually doing it to, being completely impartial, allowing our members release their frustration. But it was a real creative risk because you didn't know how people were going to quite react to it. But we always trust our gut, and we developed a lovely piece of content. We filmed it in the gym. As I say, we kind of had Boris Johnson on a punch bag. We had Nigel Farage on a slam ball. We had a Theresa May sack race. So it was done with a little bit of humor as well. And actually, from a creative point of view, it went global. So it didn't just hit the London market. We had content going on television in Australia, India, in Canada. It went completely global. So it was a risk, and we didn't spend a lot of money on it. It went really, really well.
That's awesome. Now, you also alluded to in that part, just talking about how the audience has changed, and I think alluding to the idea of being more inclusive and making sure you're not offending anybody, because I feel like that's kind of the shift that's been happening, where people are more aware. So how's that with the political thing? That's a risk in itself. You have to make sure you're doing it in a way. So have you found it to be difficult to keep the humor? I also do think in terms of British humor, I know you're Irish, but British humor, that's part of it, is making fun of politicians, and so trying to find walk that fine line. And have you been able to do that, or have you found it to be difficult?
It is really difficult, because you do need to try and get a sense of our community, and making sure that we are inspirational, aspirational to our community, and not pissing them off. But also trying to have a little bit of disruption in the marketplace, that people notice you. And I think our view, as I said, our view is to be disruptive but not offensive. So, and again, what offends one person may not offend another person. So we've got a great team of agencies, freelancers, in-house. We've got a really young, cool kind of staff network of sales teams, receptionists, and we run these ideas across the board to almost sense check. It's almost like internal market research before we go with it. But ultimately, we really trust our gut. If we feel comfortable with it, we know we're going to probably offend some people, because people can get offended by anything in this day and age. But as long as we feel that it's true to our brand DNA, we'll go with it. And I say we don't always get it right. A creative brand will sometimes I wouldn't say get it wrong, but we are what I want to call we're unexpected, we're unapologetic, we're unpredictable, we're unusual. So with that, you're always gonna rock the boat a little bit, and that's kind of what we want with the brand.
Yeah, it's essentially going with your gut and making sure that if you feel confident and proud of it, then it's going to be right.
Exactly.
Now, we've talked a lot about the risks you take in your marketing strategies, particularly at Gymbox, but I'm also curious to know more about the risks you've taken in your career. So you've worked, like I said before, in a variety of roles, from an account manager to communications management. So do you think the risks you've taken have led you to who you are today and where you are today? And has your personal decision to not follow the status quo impacted your success as a marketer?
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to what I said earlier around my personal journey, my career have kind of run in parallel. And I think, it sounds a little bit kind of wanky, but kind of most of our heroes are heroes because of like acts of rebellion or defiance. And by no means I'm saying I'm a hero at all, but I just mean taking that analogy, it's almost to do things different in your career. I don't want to follow what people do. I want to try things that are different. I want to take risks. I've always wanted to kind of become better. I've always had a journey in my mind where I wanted to be. I wanted to be kind of top marketing person in my career, and I knew I couldn't, for example, stay in a job for 6-7 years if I wasn't progressing. So I've always taken risks, and particularly in my early career, moved jobs quite regularly to get skills that I hadn't been receiving. So, for example, a Paddy Power, which was a huge brand doing some great things, and it was really making waves, but I wasn't getting certain digital and social skills. This is going back probably 10 years ago now, which I saw where the industry was going. So I had to leave, and I had to take that risk to actually jump ship and leave a role that I loved and a brand that I admired to get those personal skills. So I think for me, I do take those risks. And when people say to you, God, you're mad leaving that role, or why are you leaving to do this? I actually think that's a good thing for me. I know I don't want to feel comfortable in a role. When it feels too comfortable, it's time to actually challenge myself. And I like being out of my comfort zone a little bit.
Yeah, and I think there's like two ways to live life, right? I feel like some people just live on cruise control or autopilot, and they're just kind of not taking risks. They're comfortable and they don't want to disrupt things. But then there's, on the other hand, people like yourself who are taking risks, trying something new to challenge themselves. And I think in a way you become a role model, not because you're trying to be, like a superhero or be the best of the best, but since you're taking risks, you probably affect like the circles around you and the people who we work with, and they might, hey, I want to take a risk like he did, and it's kind of like passing that along to them. So
yeah, and it's funny. At the time, I never thought of it that way. I never felt I was taking risks, or I felt I could be a role model or anything like that. It was kind of just it's just a personal choice. It's just being ambitious and being just being hungry and having a desire to kind of better yourself, and it's almost kind of self-fulfillment in terms of trying to be happy in what I'm doing. And when I'm not happy, I just go.
Exactly.
take that risk. You know what? I'd rather live with the regret of trying something that didn't work out than not taking that risk and kind of always thinking, should I have tried something different?
Exactly. And it's like the idea of being happy, but while taking a risk and taking yourself out of your comfort zone, that kind of ties into what Gymbox is, like having fun while doing things that may not be, may not be into fitness, and it's your first time trying to do it, and you have this fun class and it kind of takes your mind off of it. So while it's like kind of your philosophy is kind of what the gym's philosophy is.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why it's such a great personal and brand fit for me, because it meets kind of my personal ambitions too.
So I'm a bit curious though to learn more about like what a typical day at work is like for you, because you mentioned before that you get a free gym membership, the gym's right across the street. Like I want to know a bit more about how that works. Like, do you work out during the day, or like what do you get to go like see what's going on at the gym? And also just learn a bit more about what areas of responsibility you have.
Yeah, do you know what? With a brand like Gymbox, we're really lean. So I do everything. So I have a very small team, and I have a number of kind of internal, or I guess a couple of freelancers that we dip into every now and again. I've got some external agencies that we use, and I think because of that, I tend to be meeting up people a lot of the time. So I'm an early starter. We have the gym. I come into the gym in the morning to kind of get that done. I like to have a little bit of quiet time before everybody then comes in. And because we're quite topical and trying to do relevant campaigns, I try and have an hour, 40 minutes to an hour every morning where I feel very old school now. I used to get all the newspapers delivered, and I'd kind of go through. Now it's very different. I've got my kind of whole internet favorites up. I just scour the news to just see, is there anything going on that we can tap into? So I mentioned Brexit before. Obviously, that was quite a big one. We've done stuff around climate change, CBD oil. So these ideas come from what's going on in the world. So I like to have a bit of that thinking time early in the morning, which is my kind of creative time before the day goes crazy. And then really, the day becomes about kind of in the mornings, it's internal and actually just setting up teams. We've got so much going on, from paid social media to PR campaigns to a new brand campaign to new creative classes launching. We tend to also then have workshops in terms of coming up with new classes. So I actually quite often then lunchtime go to another class and I attend the class so I can see what's going on and give some input into how I think we should structure it. And then really my afternoons, I try and get out. We have a lot of, again, we don't like to be too insular and just stuck in the office all the time. So we do a lot of networking. So in the afternoons, I tend to want to go to my agency and work from there and set up different partner meetings, some great brands that we partnered with in London. And actually, it's really about networking in the afternoon. So kind of the first half of the day tends to be inward focused, setting up the teams, getting everything done. And the second half of the day is really about kind of networking, brainstorming, and kind of getting kind of new partnerships going. So, but again, there's no typical day at Gymbox. What may be important today, tomorrow something will drop, and it becomes the biggest piece that we have to work on. So everything's out the window.
That's awesome. And it seems like you really have a lot of, and well, it seems like the days are dynamic, which makes it really interesting. And you're not going to have the same day over and over again, but also like you're having hands-on experience with the product that you're marketing itself. So you're actually doing the classes, you're talking to the people in the classes, observing. So it's really cool. You get to like take that and then use it and see where you can improve and where you can change.
Yeah, it's great. And like I say, having that passion and being interested in that industry makes it so much easier. It doesn't feel like work. I know it's again, it's a cliche, but it really doesn't feel like if you get a job you love, you won't work a day in your life. It does feel like that at times at Gymbox, which is a great place to be. It's very unusual, very unique.
It's really rewarding. Now, and one thing too that you've mentioned a couple of times is that you're organizing a team and you work with freelancers and other agencies and in-house resources. Now, in my experience, because I've worked as a freelancer and as a project manager at one of those agencies that helps, other companies get their marketing off the ground. The one thing I really have heard a lot from like the people and the clients I've worked with is how difficult it can be to manage and organize all these resources. So how do you do it? Like, do you have any tips or tricks on organizing everything and making sure everyone's kind of aligned and cohesive?
Yeah, do you know what? It's probably the most challenging part of my role, actually, because I'll take credit for all the ideas we have, but ultimately I don't really do anything. All I do is project manage and move different pieces around. Now, I know I do myself a little disservice there, but my role is very much about bringing in the experts in the individual fields. So finding the best PPC and SEO guy we can get to help drive that part of the business. Getting the best copywriter. We're very copy-led. I've got this amazing copywriter. We've got an amazing freelance graphic designer. So because we are a small business, we don't necessarily have the resource to bring everybody in-house. And right. I wouldn't necessarily have the work full-time for a graphic designer, but I can dip in and out of this person when I need them. Now, the big challenge you have with that, with having, I would say probably we've got between freelancers and agencies, maybe 10 different kind of people / agencies. And it's making sure, again, my role is all about making sure they buy into what we're trying to achieve and they get our brand. Our business is led by brand. And, it's very difficult when, particularly in this COVID world, when everything's on Zoom and Google Meets, where you're having one-on-one conversations. And what I'm trying to do now that the world is kind of getting back in is getting us back together in a room regularly and maybe even not talking about day to day, but just what we're up to with the brand, what my vision is, where we're going in the next year, and making sure everyone's on that journey with us. And that's the kind of key challenge for me, kind of going into kind of 2022 and beyond.
Like, and make sure people are motivated and cohesive in that sense.
That's absolutely important. Yeah. There's nothing worse than a disjointed, schizophrenic looking campaign that doesn't tie up somewhere. And it's kind of my biggest pet hate. And it has happened with kind of one-on-one conversations. So my focus is just making sure as a member or a prospective member, they don't see that kind of discipline. We need to make sure we bring it all together.
Now you brought up like probably the most topical piece of conversation, right, from the last year, which is COVID. And I recently had Ant Martland from Gym Nation, which is based in the United Arab Emirates, on the show. And he does like marketing for them. And we talked about kind of the future of fitness post-COVID. And I hate talking about COVID, but it's also something that we have to deal with every day in our lives. So kind of in your opinion, I'd like to hear your insight on this. Like, do you believe that the pandemic was beneficial or detrimental to the fitness industry? And how has your approach to marketing changed over the past year and a half?
You know what? I know Ant. I didn't know he was on, actually. I should have listened to his podcast before to make sure we were aligned. But I think it's a super interesting topic and still something that we're all figuring out a little bit. Like my personal view is, so, our business shut down overnight, like many businesses did.
Mm.
And the initial thought was like, shit, like, what's going to happen? Or, are we going to lose our jobs? Is the gym industry going to survive? Am I going to survive? Now, I think when you look back at it, there was obviously some short-term challenges. However, now looking back at it, I actually think a few things have happened. So we now have a digital product. We have a digital product and called Out the Box, which is our online fitness platform. Now, we're a small London brand. We have 11 clubs. We are now in 75 countries worldwide. Wow. So our brand presence in the space of 18 months has gone from London to global. Now, obviously on a very small scale, and we are a bricks and mortar business, and now we're kind of in the digital world. So it was a huge learning, and it's different. But actually, what it does is it gives us massive opportunities to kind of I'm super excited because we have ambitions to grow internationally beyond London. And we want to look at kind of really interesting cities. And the fact that we are now in 75 different countries, we can actually build up a brand presence. We can look at where we are over-indexing on classes online. So we can see actually maybe New York or Sydney or Sao Paulo is the place to actually build a brand and open up new clubs. I think also the way we will work in the future is going to change. So having that hybrid model of a member saying, well, I'm only going to be in London 2 days a week or 3 days a week. Our gyms are very city center based. So having that digital platform, which we may not have had if it wasn't for COVID, means that we can actually give people a fuller service to say, well, actually, we've got a digital product. So you can come to the gym 2 days a week and then you can work out from home 2 days a week. And so I think it's actually allowed us to build the brand in a way we may not have done before. And it's fast tracked a lot of our projects that we've always talked about. Nothing was new. We were always going to go digital, but we had no choice and we did it quickly. So I think my overall view is, in the short term, it was an absolute disaster and a nightmare, but we learned quickly, we moved fast. And I think actually it's going to set us up well once we kind of come out the other side, which I think we are now.
And it's pushed people to take a lot of risks. Like you said before, like you wanted to go digital, but then you maybe, didn't have the time, or because of the situation, you had no choice. So I think a lot of people were pushed to do things that they had not in the back burner, but like in their mind, and they just had to implement it right away.
Yeah, 100%. And I think also, maybe we're sometimes too critical and we won't launch projects until we're 100% happy with them. And what we have to do is we have to move fast and think on our feet. So we were getting stuff out the door, maybe 80% correct because we needed to, and we were tweaking it as we went. And I don't think we would have ever done that before. And it's actually just changed our mindset, which I think which is positive for us. Yeah.
And I think with like anything, it has its pros and cons. And I think one thing I really enjoyed about the pandemic, you can't say that, but what as a result, like with things like education and with fitness, I think it's people have had more access to these things than they never had before. And I do think there's nothing like going to a gym with people and having that human interaction. The same with like education, going to school and having a class setting. It's important. But I think one good thing is, people have access to it, and I think people maybe will prioritize things like learning or fitness. They can do it at home and they can fit it easier into their schedule.
100%.
I think that's a cool thing that's come out of it. So kind of get a silver lining, right? It's been a crazy year.
It's one of those things that you may never have done it. And actually, you know what? It's been a shit show, but I think people are better for it. I think you appreciate things more now.
Now, we also touched upon kind of like the changing times, and something that we just talked about now with COVID, but also with your, the audience and using social media. And I wanted to ask you, like, in your opinion, what are some skills that you think are really important for marketers to have nowadays while everything's changing so quickly?
You know what? I've got a slightly different view on this one in terms of, so with COVID, it was an opportunity. A lot of people left businesses. They got new careers. People had a chance to think what they wanted to do. And I was in a position where I was actually hiring and rebuilding the team over COVID, which was a little bit tricky remotely. And I was getting hundreds of CVs through. We're quite a cool brand. People want to work for us. And, I was looking at all these different skill sets, and people had, paid social media skills or PPC skills. And actually my view changed a little bit through my interview process, where yes, skills are important, but I think it's more about attitude and that personal connection you have with somebody. And I feel like, particularly as I'm recruiting and slightly more junior people getting into marketing, it's about having the right attitude. Are they hungry? Have they a desire to learn? Will culturally they fit in? I think skills you can learn, and I think as long as you have that right attitude and desire, you can learn anything. And I think actually, if people have been in a job for 5-6 years, they may be a bit institutionalized, and the skills they're learning are part of how that company does it. And actually, I feel that as long as you have the right mindset, and yes, you've got to have some skills. I think having, in my role or in marketing roles, project management, being commercially minded, having a creative eye, are important. But actually, it's more about, will you kind of push yourself and will you want to learn? And for me, that's what I look for now when I'm recruiting.
Like that, like desire to keep learning and challenging yourself, essentially. Now, on the show too, like our listeners kind of are, people who are very experienced in content marketing, or they're starting out in content marketing. But I think all of them come to the show to listen, to hear advice from other people and how they can improve. So this is a 2-part question, but first I kind of wanted to know, like, what do you think some companies get wrong when it comes, or some marketers get wrong when it comes to content marketing? And then what advice would you give to somebody who's just starting out now, who's interested in the field?
So I think, to answer your first question, it's kind of difficult. What do people get wrong in content marketing? We get a lot wrong in content marketing, but that's because we take risks and you try stuff. My view or advice on that one would be, don't just follow what other people do. I see a lot of that in the marketplace now, and it's very obvious. Being safe with your content and actually not taking those risks is probably the worst thing you can do. A little example that I've seen quite recently, is quite topical at the moment, was Drake's new album dropped, Certified Lover Boy. And I don't know if you saw all the babies, and every brand has kind of done a version of that. And I'm kind of going, it's a bit boring. Like, I could put a kettlebell on it, or I could put a dumbbell on it, but it's like, who cares? It's not original, it's not unique, it's not different. And I think you do see a lot of brands doing that. I think the other bit you see with brands from content marketing is they're trying to do too much in one piece of content. They're trying to make it go viral, but have a sales message in it and convert that sales. Now, actually, our content isn't about converting sales. It's about developing great content, getting that engagement, and then we'll hit them later. We got their data. We can go follow them. We can go and convert them at a later stage. But right now, let's entertain them. And I think that's the big thing, that people are making that mistake. They're trying to do too much with one piece of content.
Yeah, and I think like that's something that's been coming up a lot in these interviews I've been doing for the podcast. I think we had like Haley Collingswood on 2 weeks ago, and then last week, or this, it's gonna be last episode before this, was with Adriana Carlos, and they both talked about the importance of building your brand, but also like not overwhelming yourself, and kind of knowing what your brand is, and then organically then building the content marketing strategy behind it. And it seems like that you're also a proponent of that as well, like not overwhelming yourself and the numbers come after. It's just more about telling your story and getting it across.
Absolutely. Now, the bigger challenge for marketers is internally. I've got a board to report to, and they're looking for results, and you're trying to bring them on that journey, saying, look, the results will follow. We're looking at long-term brand building, and that's the bigger challenge. And then I think, to answer your second question, in terms of advice to people starting out, I did touch on a little bit earlier on with taking risks. And my view is, particularly if you're starting out, there's so many areas within marketing and content. It could be brand strategy, it could be market research, it could be PR, it could be paid social media. The list goes on. My view is, you may not know what you want to do yet, and that's okay. Try and get a role. I went agency side to start off with because it gave me exposure to different parts of marketing that I may not have got if I went into a particular brand. And don't be afraid to move around when you're young. As I say, I think somebody who has 5 years early on in a job on their CV is doing themselves a disservice. They're going to get institutionalized. They're going to, you need to keep learning. And I think really, if you can do something you're passionate about, it's very difficult to walk into a brand like Gymbox or Heineken or McDonald's as a marketing assistant or whatever that entry level may be. So my tip, or what I did, was go into an agency and get that experience. I wanted to work for Heineken, and the agency had Heineken as an account. So it was my way kind of in to a brand that I was interested in. So try and find different ways in and work for a brand that you're passionate about, because then it will make your life so much easier.
So that's really great advice, I think. And if you're not passionate about your job, then it's kind of like, what are you doing? You need to find something that really, gets you going and gets you out of bed in the morning. I think that's so important. Now, I think a lot of people are going to be curious now too, and so am I. As someone, you see someone that takes risks, you like to challenge yourself. It seems like you're constantly trying to learn and learn about new trends and what's going on in the news. So, what are your daily habits, and what habits would you attribute to your success?
Wow.
And that's a big question.
I don't know. There's a couple of things. As I say, I don't really switch off. I'm a very, I take a lot of things in. I tend to cycle around London. I'm always kind of, looking at adverts. When I go to cinema, I'm actually thinking about how could I steal one of their ideas and take it for the gym world.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm always kind of thinking about, in my daily life, stuff I see that I can kind of adapt into my world. If I see a great advert that someone's done, I'm pissed off because I didn't come up with it, and I kind of try and take ideas. But I also, it sounds funny for someone in marketing, but I don't really like. Everyone says to me, "I'll read this marketing book, and here's this way of learning." I'm not a massive reader. I like listening to podcasts whilst I'm walking or sometimes cycling, but I probably shouldn't do that. It's a bit dangerous. But there is one book I would recommend that I've read, which is probably, and I've reread it probably 6 or 7 times every couple of years. And it's a book called Be More Pirate, by an ex-ad man called Sam Conniff, if I pronounce that correctly. And the premise of the book, it is a business book, but again, it takes the kind of, it's inspired by the golden age of pirates and the fact that they had to rebel against the anti-establishment, and it draws parallels between their strategies to do things differently, and it compares them to kind of modern kind of rebels like Elon Musk and Banksy. It's just a very funny and super interesting way to think about challenging both yourself and your daily tasks, and then kind of taking that into your work. And what it does is it's a funny read, but actually there's workshops and a little mind bits you can do to kind of go, actually, should I be kind of thinking about things differently? And it has some really, really good examples, as I say, with Banksy, who is one of the biggest kind of rebels around, and what he does is brilliant. And it's kind of really changed my mindset, and it's helped me think about how I do things differently. So, as I say, I don't read a lot of books. I couldn't recommend a huge amount of marketing business books, but this one I would highly recommend for anyone who wants to try and just kind of, just shake the tree a little bit and do things a little bit differently, to challenge the status quo.
That's awesome. Now, besides like that book as well, and it seems like you take your source of inspiration seems to be like the world around you. You're very observant, and you're observing different advertising and different things wherever you are. Do you have like any other sources of inspiration, or a role model, or I don't know, someone that you look up to?
You know what? It's funny. I've always been a bit unlucky. I've never had a massive role model in my work. I do. I've worked with some great CEOs, and I respect a lot of people. I actually it's a bit of a funny one, but I probably take more inspiration from actually the one I've been looking at recently again is Russell Brand. I've been watching a lot of his stuff, and just again, trying to be. Again, it sounds a little bit spiritual, and I'm not a spiritual person as such, but it's trying to be kinder. And also, I work in marketing, and I'm kind of, it's about commercial and driving sales, and
right.
But it's doing it in the right way. I actually think by listening to kind of other people and being kind and doing things in a different way, I've actually kind of taken a little bit of inspiration from that in terms of making do things well, and make sure I feel proud of what I'm doing, and I'm not just peddling memberships to people who may not need them necessarily. So, very much kind of just taking inspiration from, as I say, everyday life, and just listening to podcasts and different people.
That's awesome. And it's nice to hear that. I think a lot of times people are like, I have this inspiration, this person or this book, and it's kind of you're someone that's just observing the world around you and just trying to be a better person, I think.
And it's funny. I think inspiration can come from anywhere. As I say, it's not necessarily a role model, but there are some amazing things going on a a micro level where you just see kindness with people in supermarkets, crossing the road, helping other people out, and actually that inspires me.
Yeah, and it's something we need more than ever nowadays.
Yeah, 100%. Be ambitious, but be humble and be kind, and do the best you can do for your business, but also make sure you can sleep well at night and make sure you're trying your best to improve other people's lives.
Yeah. Well, on that note, unfortunately, we're at the end of the interview because I feel like we could have talked about that for much longer.
That's a whole other podcast.
It's a whole other podcast, but super inspirational, and like it's nice to hear that paying it forward and just being a good person, things fall into place. But before we conclude the interview, I was just wondering, do you have any like final takeaways or a piece of parting advice for our listeners?
What I would just say, certainly from a marketing point of view, just really, be brave, trust your gut, and just do what makes you happy. Really, just do what makes you happy, because it will enrich your life, and there is more to life than just work. So make sure you kind of are fulfilled in anything you do.
Yeah, and those are words to live by for sure. So thank you so much, Rory, again, for sharing your insights with us and that inspirational last little note at the end of the podcast. But I also want to thank everyone for listening in. So for more perspectives on the content marketing industry in Europe and other exciting interviews like this one I just had with Rory, check out bearcontent.com/mix and keep tuning in to the podcast for more interviews with content experts. So we'll see you all next time. Thanks again, Rory.
Thank you. Bye-bye.